Hey guys, welcome to the second of two so far follow-ups to my series on the Whispers. Before addressing some more of the comments that I received to that topic, I did real quick want to do an update on something I said in the last follow-up regarding the pillar of black smoke that we see in 1988. This is something that I suddenly realized after I had already uploaded the last video to YouTube, and I was just quality checking it, making sure that everything, uploaded correctly or whatever. And when I got to the clip that I showed of Jen seeing the pillar of black smoke in 1988, something finally occurred to me, something that I think maybe was intended to be obvious, when it first aired. And therefore maybe this is something that most people already realize, and I am just now, all these years later, getting on the same page about. So first, let me kind of explain why I think I never realized. Let me explain what I thought I was seeing every time I've seen that scene over the years. Because of the story that Russo tells in the season 1 finale about the pillar of black smoke appearing, and her insinuation that she associates that pillar that she saw in 1988 with the others and with the abduction of Alex. Because I had that in my head going into my first time watching the episode This Place is Death, which is where Jen is time traveling and sees the pillar, my immediate thought when we see that pillar, as Jen sees it, my immediate thought was, oh wow, that's the pillar of black smoke Rousseau talked about seeing off in the distance. And therefore, the very next scene, which is Jen wandering into the French team's camp, I did not associate the pillar of black smoke as being the place that Jen saw that smoke coming from. The way I've always read that scene up until now is that Jen sees the pillar of black smoke, thinks, oh, that's weird, and then he goes back to the beach where he first encountered the French team, and then that's when he discovers the camp and the dead bodies, and he sees Rousseau kill her husband, etc. But what finally occurred to me when I was watching the clip that I put in my last video, I finally noticed that he looks at the pillar of black smoke and then he seems to proceed towards it. And then that's where I cut off the scene in my last video, but that got me curious to go back to that episode and actually look at Jen's arrival at the beach camp. And sure enough, one of the first things he sees is something that has smoke coming out of it. Now, it's not a giant plume of smoke, which is why I think I've always just looked at that as a campfire. But then, as the camera continues to pan around the camp, we see an actual campfire that is separate from this thing that has smoke coming out of it. Hey guys, this is the editing version of Chris, and I just realized that I'm an idiot. What we actually see is just two different angles and probably two different takes of the same campfire. The first time you see it at the first angle, it appears to just be smoking with no flames, but then when you see it from a different angle and possibly a different take, you can see that there are flames. And yeah, for some reason, when I got excited about this idea, I failed to notice that this was the same campfire, just at two different angles. So everything I'm about to say after this is kind of just based on me getting excited about this idea. But yeah, I decided to go ahead and keep it in because I thought it is an interesting idea, and I suppose it is still possible that the smoke could be coming from that beach or near it.
But yeah, the observation about there being two campfires or whatever was wrong. So yeah, just letting you guys know that.
And so now this has completely recontextualized the 1988 Pillar of Black Smoke for me. I didn't bother to talk about my interpretation of what the Pillar of Black Smoke in 1988 meant, because I was just going to save that for a video that I will probably end up doing at some point in the future about the French team and their whole situation. But I'm sure it's already obvious that my association of the 2004 Pillar with the Man in Black, I'm sure you guys kind of figured that I also associate the 1988 Pillar with the Man in Black and what he was up to at that time. Without getting into all of the other details that I'm gonna save for another video, basically, since we know the French team was infected at that point, and in fact, this is the day that Rousseau is killing her team because they are infected, I was under the belief that the Man in Black was using that signal, that plume of smoke, to call his infected followers, I don't know, the team that he has infected, I believe he had them doing his bidding at this stage, and some of what they were up to is exactly why Rousseau was freaked out and ended up killing them. So yeah, for years I've always thought that the pillar we see in 88 was the Man in Black summoning the French team to him at a location that he was at. But now, what I'm thinking is they were signaling him. And I think this attempt on their part to signal this monster and or the others, who, keep in mind, Rousseau associates, she thinks of the monster and the others as essentially the same force. She says to Robert right before she kills him that the monster made him sick. But then right after that, she also asserts that Jin, who she thinks is one of these other people, is a carrier, and that he made them sick. And then she even says that to Saeed years later, that it was the others, they're carriers, they're the ones that infected. And it makes sense that she associates these mysterious other people with this force of energy and smoke. It makes sense that she associates them because of what Robert tells her. Robert says that it's not a monster, it's a security system that's designed to protect that temple. So yeah, it makes sense that Rousseau would then make the deduction that, okay, the temple, this must be where these other people are living, or at least some of them. This somewhat sentient cloud of black smoke is, according to Robert, a security system protecting that. It makes sense that she would then start interpreting the monster through the lens of, okay, the others have control of this thing, and it serves them, basically. So yeah, I think in the time it took Jin to get from where he sees the pillar of black smoke to that location, I think in that time, Rousseau is like, no, like, you guys, like, they're signaling the smoke monster and or the others from her perspective for reasons that she does not fully understand. And I think that is the final thing in a sequence of things where she decides she's got to kill her team. I also think at this point, you know, she says to Saeed, when she first tells this story to Saeed, she says that she killed her team because what if they were rescued?
You killed them.
What would have happened if we were rescued? I couldn't let that happen.
And so them setting this giant signal fire, you know, she doesn't understand at this point. I'm not sure that she ever really understands that nobody from the outside world is really going to be able to see that giant plume of smoke. But you know, the fact that she doesn't know that yet, that she thinks it's definitely possible for somebody to see that pillar of smoke that's not from the island, it makes sense that she would kind of freak out and be like, yeah, no, I've got to kill them. I can't let us be rescued when they're like this. So yeah, I think it is at that point that she starts killing the team, and I think she suffocates that fire. And I think that that's why by the time Jen arrives, it's no longer a big plume. Now, I also think that that kind of recontextualizes what I was saying about Russo telling her story to the 815ers in the season 1 finale. And, you know, I said that the story she tells is that she sees that pillar of smoke the day preceding the night where the others come and take Alex. And the way she's telling that story is that pillar of black smoke, which she only saw on that day, was an indication of their plans to abduct Alex, which we later see is not true, because when we see the pillar in 1988, it is before Alex is even born. So it's at least a few weeks before Alex is taken. And we also know that the pillar had nothing to do with the abduction because there was no plan to do that. That was a spur of the moment decision by Ben. There was no plan to kidnap Alex. So I've said previously that Russo is either misremembering the sequence of events and therefore mistakenly associating that pillar with the abduction of Alex, or she is intentionally embellishing her story to make it more dramatic so that the 815ers are more likely to be kind of freaked out and panicky and, you know, more distracted so that she can take Aaron, because she does genuinely believe that the others are coming for that child that night. So yeah, the idea that it was actually her people that generated that pillar of smoke, if that's true, which I now believe that it is, it would mean that she was intentionally embellishing her story, which was the idea that I preferred. In this new scenario, where her team is the one that generated that, it makes sense that she did associate that with the others and what they were up to, because she believes that her team was acting out of their changed behavior, which stems from the monster, which in her mind stems from the others. So even though it was her team that created that pillar in 1988, she would genuinely associate that with the others and the idea that they are coming. If she thinks that her team generated that pillar to summon them, then that is literally what she thinks that pillar means. It means the others are coming. So yeah, I think I think if that is what we were being shown, which I think maybe that is what we were being shown, and I just was completely missing that all this time. If we were being shown that the pillar in 1988 came from her team, I think that kind of neatly explains, or neatly clarifies what Russo was up to with her story, while also, you know, explaining that, you know, that she wouldn't have been surprised that a pillar appeared, even though she had embellished that detail. Once again, I'm not clear on if I'm one of the only people that didn't immediately understand that Jin sees the pillar and then goes towards it, and then he arrives at the French team's camp. Again, I don't know if that's something that everybody else has kind of already realized, or maybe, I don't know, maybe now I'm projecting that. Maybe everybody else kind of interpreted it the way I did. And now, you know, maybe you guys think I'm reading into it. But okay, now let's get back into addressing some of the comments that I received. Starting with one from user Shokas, who says, "This is definitely an interesting take. The whispers are so weird, especially with the audio transcripts. Sometimes they say things that are simply observant. Is this blank? Who's coming? Relax, dude, she likes the guy." This was about Shannon and Saeed. And pretty vague observational things like that. Someone said Elizabeth in the season 2 finale, And even more telling are the ones that Shannon heard, where you can hear "dying sucks," "hi sis," and "Shannon, meet me on the other side." I always liked the idea that Boone was a whisperer until the Sweat Lodge vision in further instructions, when he finally could go to the afterlife. Okay, so there are a couple of things about what Shokast says there that I want to talk about. But I want to start with Boone specifically. My next series, my next theory and analysis, will be all about the various apparitions that we see throughout the series. And this Sweat Lodge vision with Boone is absolutely going to be one of the ones I discuss. All I'll say right now about that is that I do believe that this vision and this manifestation of Boone, I do think that that's the Man in Black. I will go into all of the reasons why in that upcoming video. Yeah, for now I'll say I do think it's the Man in Black. That is my interpretation of the sequence. But as far as this idea that it was genuinely Boone and that Boone was in the same state that Michael was apparently in, again, if we're taking that interpretation of the Whispers, which is that they are ghosts, they are spirits that are stuck for an indeterminate amount of time as these spirits on the island. I find the idea that Boone or anyone else, the idea that they would have to go through two separate purgatory-style states of existence before finally moving on to the actual afterlife proper, I find that idea to be kind of convoluted. I find the flash sideways in the series finale specifically, I find them to be an excellently executed and emotionally cathartic depiction of a realm in which souls can resolve their issues, let go of their baggage, and move on to what comes next. The idea of adding a third phase of afterlife that serves no additional purpose beyond what the Flash Sideways already do, I think, if anything, for me, that diminishes the impact of the Flash Sideways. And to be clear, when I say that adding this third phase of an afterlife, when I say adding that would serve no additional purpose beyond what the Flash Sideways already serve, what I mean is it serves no additional purpose for the characters, such as Boone or Michael. As I talked about in part 3 of the video essay, the idea that Michael would need some kind of closure or resolution to his relationship with Walt before ceasing to be a whisperer, that idea makes no sense to me, given that that is exactly the type of thing that the Flash Sideways are established to be for. That is their established purpose in the story. And obviously in the Boone scenario, in this interpretation that Shokast puts forth, Boone's moving on from being a whisperer wouldn't be connected to getting that type of closure. So, yeah, basically it would seem that he needed to fulfill this purpose on behalf of the island, I guess, or, some higher power. That goes back to the higher power interpretation of why a person would be trapped in this state, which, if you've seen part 3 of my video, I like that even less than the idea that someone being trapped in that state, the idea that it's self-imposed, either consciously or unconsciously. I don't like either interpretation of somebody genuinely being stuck in that state, but I do think, I find the idea that it's self-imposed to be significantly easier to swallow, at least in certain ways, than the idea that a higher power is condemning certain people to this fate and not others. But anyways, in this interpretation of it genuinely being Boone, and then once he fulfills this purpose on the behalf of some higher power, then he is allowed to proceed to the flash sideways, where he then moves on with everybody else to the final actual afterlife. That is all convoluted to me, and in my eyes, yeah, it serves adding that third phase of the afterlife. It serves no purpose for the characters, and it doesn't serve any other purpose in the story, for the story, other than to randomly give off these spooky vibes whenever the storytellers feel like they want to add that in, or to act as a seriously inconsistent and lazy plot device to communicate certain information to the characters and to us, the audience. As I've talked to death by this point, the idea that these spirits, either on their own behalf or the behalf of a higher power, such as the island, fate, whatever you want to call it, the idea that they interfere in situations that are not at all consistent, to give warnings or to give information where other times they do not. I see no way to reconcile these inconsistencies in such a way that it makes sense. The only explanation for such inconsistencies is that sometimes the storytellers just want to convey information to the characters or to us. And okay, well, let's have a ghost do it. Or let's have, this ominous whispering do it. Yet again, this would be a plot contrivance or a lazy plot device. And as I said in the last video, yes, every story has some degree of contrivance, but this would be a much more egregious one than any other one that I recognize in the show Lost. And as the whole purpose of us having this discussion and of the video essay is that I feel we have a very viable alternative that would not be such a plot contrivance. It would be specifically based on a character's believable motivations, and it would be consistent with their abilities. Now, getting back to what Shokas was saying, Shokas's whole point in that is that he likes that idea. The idea that Boone is a whisperer until he fulfills this purpose and then he moves on. Everything I've just said, that's me explaining why I don't like it. And the vast majority of everything I've just said is subjective, which means I really haven't said anything, and I don't think I could say anything that could ever definitively refute Shokas's interpretation as being wrong. Just because I don't like something obviously does not mean that no one else should. So the reason that I just went into all of that detail, it isn't to say that Shokas is wrong or that anybody else that, has that interpretation is wrong. It's more so that I don't like to just say that I don't like a certain thing. I like to make it clear why I don't like it. I like to try and communicate that as best I can. And if that results in people agreeing with me, then cool. I'll take it. But that is not my main goal. My main goal is not to convince people that I'm right. If anything, what I'm interested in is convincing people that I'm not necessarily wrong for having a contrarian view to what seems to be the generally accepted interpretation. So yeah, my point in saying everything that I've said, again, it's not to try and prove anybody wrong. It's to kind of over-explain why I don't like it, why I don't feel compelled to share the interpretation, and to kind of give even more reasoning for why I prefer a different interpretation. Now, Shokas did mention at the beginning of his comment some of what the transcripts of the whispers, what they say can actually be heard in the whispers if you use audio filtration equipment to kind of enhance that audio. And basically if you have the technology, you can kind of decipher what some of these whispers are saying, and people have done that. And there are transcripts that you can find online for what these whispers are saying. And user Ben Ward had actually asked me if I was going to address that. He said, "Will you be addressing the transcripts of the whispers at any point? Lostpedia has a bunch which are apparently decoded using audio software by fans. And, assuming they're accurate, a lot of them come across as multiple island dwellers, supernatural or otherwise, discussing the new island arrivals." I'm actually just now seeing their updated edit as I'm reading this and recording this. But yeah, they also said, "Looking again at the Whisper transcripts entry on that site, I think this is mostly bullshit and fan theorists hearing what they want to hear." So yeah, when Ben originally commented that, I was like, okay, yeah, I should actually include a link to Lostpedia and those transcripts in the description to my video. So before responding to him, I went to that page of Lostpedia and I started looking through the transcripts, and I came to a very similar conclusion about a lot of them that Ben just shared. There are lots of transcripts from episodes and scenes in which I hear no evidence whatsoever that the whispers are even present. One example is in the pilot episode when the monster is first encountered, when it's knocking down the trees on that first night. According to Lostpedia and the transcripts that it has posted, there are whispers present in that scene, and some of the things that they claim can be heard somehow. I'm very, very skeptical of, and yeah, there are other scenes like that too, like in the episode where Ben first appears as Henry Gale. According to Lostpedia, there's whispers heard all throughout the hatch, throughout that episode, as Ben is interrogating, or I'm sorry, as Saeed is interrogating Ben, and as Jack is trying to get Locke to let him in. Since seeing that on Lostpedia, I've gone back over all those scenes, and I've watched them on different devices. Like I've looked at them on Hulu on my computer. I've looked at them on Hulu on my phone. I've looked at them on Blu-ray. I don't have the fancy audio equipment, but I really struggle to believe that anyone involved in making this show put whispers in these scenes and made them so inaudible that only somebody going through each and every episode of the series, each and every scene of the series, looking for things, could have found such things. And again, the transcripts of what these supposed whispers are saying, like, it's so bizarre that I don't really agree with it. But since we're talking about it now, like I didn't want to put that link in the description of my video because I do not find it reliable. But now that I'm talking about all of this, I will put it in the description to this video, and then you guys can look at it and decide for yourselves, if you think it's legit or not. I will say that in the past, since the show finished airing, I've long considered Lostpedia to be a very valuable resource. But what really upsets me is this thing, Lostpedia, this site that I have long looked to and referred other people to as a valuable resource. It really bothers me that it is no longer reliable the way that it used to be. So yeah, we'll see if I end up keeping that whole rant in this video or not. But my point is, I think it's wise at this point, especially, to take anything that you read on Lostpedia with a grain of salt. I still think there is a lot of valuable insight to be found there. I think it does point out quite a few things that a lot of people may not notice. But I would caution everyone to, if you read something and you're like, wow, like I had no idea that that was true, maybe do some independent research before you start repeating that, because not everything that's on there is accurate, and it may have never been, but yeah, in more recent years it's become much more apparent to me that there are inaccuracies on that site. Anyways, so yes, I will include the link to the Lostpedia transcripts in the description of this video, but Shokas actually has his own YouTube channel. You guys may remember that I referred one of his videos before. And yeah, I imagine most people that are familiar with my channel, the fact that you guys are Lost fans, I imagine that you're familiar with his channel. But just in case you're not, he actually did a video himself where he addressed a lot of the Whisper transcripts and shared, his take on what some of them may mean. And he does not just rely on the Lostpedia transcripts. He also uses ones that he apparently downloaded from a site called the Fuselage, which I'm not really familiar with, but I trust Shokas and his judgment, just from what I've seen of his videos. I think he's a reliable, I don't think he would put anything that he was skeptical of in his videos. And I think his sources are probably much more trustworthy than Lostpedia. So yeah, if you guys want to see somebody go into the transcripts of the Whispers, I definitely recommend you check out this video in particular. For my part, the reason I don't have any plans to talk about the specific transcripts, even the ones that I agree are probably accurate, the way I see it, the specific words of most of the Whispers I don't think matter too much beyond being cool little Easter eggs for the fans to discover. I'm pretty confident that the vast majority of them were never scripted, and I personally feel that the content of these transcripts, of what can apparently be heard being said, I personally feel that they are so all over the place as far as what they're discussing that you could project almost any pattern onto them, such as them being memories, them being ghosts, or them just being random thoughts, random pieces of consciousness. I think the monster is generating that sound, but yeah, I don't think that he is consciously projecting every word that can be picked out of that. I think he's kind of projecting the sound of consciousness, or consciousnesses. I think he is just projecting the sound of thoughts. Sometimes I think that there is intention behind certain things that are being heard, such as Sawyer hearing the last words of the man he killed. But generally speaking, I think that the effect, that the spooky sound of the Whispers being heard, I think that is what is intended. I mean that both in my interpretation of the Whispers, like in the story, my interpretation of the Man in Black being responsible for them. I think the intention is for them to be scary, for them to be threatening, and that raises the tensions and it escalates conflict. But I also do think that from a script writing perspective, that what is intended isn't so much the words that are only audible through using audio software. I think what is intended on a storytelling level is the effect they have on the characters, that frightening, threatening effect. So yeah, that's why I don't put too much stock into what, certain transcripts may say the Whispers are saying. That doesn't have much influence over me and my interpretation of the Whispers. But that is not to say that I don't think there are some interesting things that can be found in there. And so yeah, I do encourage you guys to check out Shokas's video and just his channel in general. If you haven't, he kind of takes the main purpose of his series is he goes episode by episode throughout the series, and it kind of maps the island and the locations that the characters travel to, which is something that I don't think that I would ever be able to do. I think it would drive me mad, trying to figure out and piece together the things that he kind of thinks about and pieces together. And then, yeah, along the way, he also kind of shares his interpretation of some of the more ambiguous, unresolved, mysterious elements of the show. Now, having talked about Shokasa's channel, that's actually the perfect transition into this comment from Zammy Ickler. Besides your channel, I've been meaning to ask, what other Lost Theory channels are there on YouTube? So yeah, obviously I've just recommended and kind of described Shokasa's channel. Another theory channel specifically that I definitely recommend checking out is called Lost Thoughts. About a year and a half before I started my channel, he had uploaded a great 35-minute video that kind of talks about the big picture of the show and the things that he feels a lot of people kind of miss, especially people that have only watched casually or only watched once. And while there are a couple of minor points in that video that I would maybe debate him on, his big picture views on the show, I absolutely agree with. You know, he was really the first person I ever saw or encountered that was kind of pointing out that the island itself and the energy itself, him and I share the interpretation that the island is a neutral natural force. It does not have a will of its own. The idea that it has a will of its own is a belief that certain people project onto it, and that belief or those beliefs are manipulated by people such as the Man in Black mainly. And yeah, his video was so well made that I was actually sad that he didn't have more. He does have other videos, a couple of which I'll actually recommend specifically in a minute, but he has other Lost videos, but it's not like a recurring thing. And so, yeah, that was one of my inspirations for starting my series. You know, the type of video that he made, I've seen other channels that I have also kind of referenced in the past. I've seen other channels do that about other stories, other book series or other TV shows, other movies. And yeah, after watching his video specifically, I was like, man, it would be so cool if there was like a Lost series that would kind of do that type of thing. And yeah, eventually, like over a year later, when the pandemic hit, I was like, you know, maybe I'll try and give that a shot. Maybe I'll try and produce consistent Lost content. Because yeah, at that time, I couldn't find any other channel that was doing that, other than a French channel, which is all in French, and I do not speak French. In case any of you do, I'll go ahead and reference them. I can't really vouch for the quality of their work because, again, I don't understand it. I do know that they did a video on Matthew Abaddon and him being Walt. I know that they were the only other channel that beat me to that. And again, I can't really watch that video and understand it, so I don't know if they made that case better or worse than me. But yeah, I get the sense that they kind of agree with that theory. Anyways, Lost Thoughts. 3 of their shorter videos that I am a really, really big fan of, and I highly recommend you guys check out. I'll link them in the description. One of them kind of relates to Game of Thrones as much as it does Lost. He released that one as the final season of Game of Thrones was airing. But yeah, I think all 3 of these are really great videos that won't take long to check out. So yeah, maybe watch those and then yeah, check out the rest of his videos for sure. Now another Lost related channel is Nutty and Nevik Productions. They've actually been releasing a podcast that also goes episode by episode throughout the series. I think they're towards the end of season 3 right now. The other thing that they do that I'm a big fan of is they do these lo-fi remixes of the music in Lost. There's an hour and a half long compilation of a lot of the remixes they've done that I've actually been listening to while writing and editing the past few videos. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking out their channel as well. And the last YouTube channel that I actually have promoted on my channel is Fringe Music 107. As you can tell from the name of that channel, they don't just do Lost videos, but they did an entire series that, again, episode by episode, went through the musical score of Lost and all of the character themes and just musical cues and how they show up in Lost and kind of how, yeah, it's just a really in-depth analysis of the music in Lost, and I definitely think that that's worth checking out as well. And when we factor in the psychic or telepathic nature of what the monster does, it makes sense that it would sometimes generate the sound of disjointed thoughts and memories, either intentionally or unintentionally. Especially when it is in the process of telepathically projecting its consciousness. This next comment comes from Engine CD. There's actually 3 parts of this that I'm going to address one at a time. Starting with, seems very obvious now when you point it out. How long have you known this? So, first of all, I would not use the word known. I'm sure everything I've said in this video and in the last one, I'm sure it's clear that this is just my interpretation of it. I've acknowledged that it's very likely the Michael scenes in season 6 were meant to be taken at face value when they were written. I suspect that that around the end of season 5, the explanation the showrunners had for the Whispers was more along the lines of what I put forth. That's just my feeling. I don't have any evidence to suggest that. Not any concrete evidence anyways. So yeah, I would not say that I known this. I wouldn't say that I know it now. But to answer the question of how long has this been my interpretation of the Whispers, so part 2 of this 3-part video, I didn't really plan on that one turning out the way that it did, like the way that it starts off recreating, the cascade of revelations that I feel come from the big twist at the end of season 5. That just kind of organically happened as I was writing the script. And really, that, me recapping that, I think goes really well with a number of other things that I will soon be talking about, such as the dreams and the apparitions. A lot of what I said in part 2 of this is a big part of the reason that I feel the way that I do about the apparitions and the dreams. The interpretations that I have of those and of the specific instances of those, a lot of that is rooted in how I felt about the ending of season 5 and that big reveal and what it subtly kind of clued us in on. Now, what I wrote and what you see me say in part 2, that stream of consciousness, if you will, I was reenacting my own experience. When I first watched the season 5 finale, the only thing that I pretty much immediately understood as I was watching it was that this fake Locke was the man in black from the beginning of the episode. When Jacob says that line about, I guess you found your loophole, I immediately, like most people, understood, like, oh, this is the guy from the beach at the beginning of the episode. The only other thing that I also pretty much immediately understood was that he must also have been the undead Christian. And that really did stem from that line of, you have no idea what I've gone through to be here. For some reason, that line and that music, it just immediately clicked for me. I think on a subconscious level, I understood that what the character was communicating was that what we have been seeing across the 5 seasons of the show, we have been witnessing his efforts to some degree. And so, yeah, when he said that line, like, I just immediately sensed that something was being revealed to us. And for some reason, my brain immediately went to Christian. I was like, well, yeah, if Locke wasn't resurrected, then Christian wasn't either. This guy must have also been Christian. And that makes sense. Christian was the one pushing Locke down this path. So yeah, that was the extent, like, by the time the episode ended, that was the extent of what I had understood from that scene. Now, it's been almost 14 years since the night that I watched that finale, when that finale aired. But I want to say it was later on that night, maybe the next day, I don't know. But the next thing that I remember realizing was Yemi. I eventually made the connection, like, okay, well, Yemi was another person that seemed to be physically present after having actually been dead. And yeah, that obviously clicked. Everything that was happening in that episode made sense. And then right then, that's when suddenly I'm like, it's the monster. Like, this guy is the monster. And from there, of course, that's when Dead is Dead suddenly, like, makes so much more sense. Like, that's completely recontextualized. And then, yeah, I don't remember how long it was exactly. I know it was at least several days. It was probably weeks. But yeah, the more I thought about what had been revealed, the more light bulbs started going off in my head of, like, oh, like, that he's also the one that caused Locke to dream about Horus telling him how to find the cabin. And, that means all these other dreams, like, may actually have been generated by this guy. And just on and on and on. Like, it was, like I said, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much had actually been answered by that one scene and that one line of dialogue. And that's why I say at the beginning of part 2, this is one of my all-time favorite plot twists, because of the degree to which it recontextualizes so many things across so many episodes of the series. But it does so in such a way where it almost seems obvious in retrospect. And because of just how subtle and organic it was, and just the more you think about it, the more it reveals. It really is the twist that keeps on giving. So yeah, a potential answer to what InGen is asking is, after the season 5 finale, within a few weeks or so of the season 5 finale, while realizing all these things, one of the things I realized was the whispers and the way that they appear with a lot of these manifestations, most of which we now knew were this man in black, because there are multiple times it appears, just like 3 times off the top of my head, that they appear around Christian, who we now knew was the man in black. And then, yeah, other apparitions, which seemed to be serving this man's agenda. What little of it we understood after the season 5 finale, that being that, he wants Jacob dead, and therefore he probably wants these people that Jacob was going around anointing in some way. He probably also wanted them dead. So yeah, just knowing that, like, not knowing what his main goal, his big picture goal was, but knowing that, you can kind of piece together, like, okay, well, some of these apparitions or dreams or whatever were leading to conflict and, getting people killed. And yeah, the whispers and how they appeared around these manifestations of this man. And then looking at the pattern of, okay, they almost always result in somebody getting killed or almost getting killed. So I in my mind, within a month or so of the season 5 finale, I felt like the mystery of the Whispers was solved. I did not think it needed to be revisited. I did not think there was any need for anything else to be said by the show on the topic of the Whispers. But then, nearly a year later, with the episode Everybody Loves Hugo, came that Michael scene, or, the two Michael scenes. And, it suddenly felt like the show was very forcibly trying to give us a completely different answer to that mystery, which I disliked because, for one, I thought it was unnecessary. But then I also disliked it for the several other reasons that I've gone into. So then, after that, for over a decade, I just kind of accepted that, well, I guess they changed their mind. I guess this is what the answer is in the show, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I just kind of accepted that that was the interpretation I was meant to have. And then it wasn't until about a year into making these videos, I was doing a rewatch. I don't even remember what it was exactly. At what point it clicked for me that well, wait a minute, my interpretation of the Whispers originally was that it was the monster generating them. So why couldn't it be the case that what Michael says, this thing that I accepted as the writers telling us what the Whispers were, in this really obnoxious way, in your face, not subtle at all way, what if, assuming that my original interpretation was correct, doesn't that make sense that the Man in Black would just kind of go along with what Hurley guesses the Whispers are? And once I kind of realized that, that's when I was like, well, crap, I can't wait to make a video about that. So I had actually mentioned that a couple years ago in my Two Birds, One Window follow-up, which I've already referred you guys to last time. So the answer to Injin's question is complicated because, the idea originally was in my head before the final season even started. But then I kind of let Everybody Loves Hugo, I kind of let that episode talk me out of that interpretation, even though it didn't make sense to me. And then it wasn't until over a decade later where I was like, well, wait a minute, that actually kind of fits with my original interpretation. If not for Kate's support and Sawyer's own small victory over his demons, the events of this episode could easily have led to results much more beneficial to the Man in Black. The next part of Injin's comment says, Sawyer and Charlie's first flashback episodes are very similar in the way that they both take a step into healing/redemption. Okay, so I want to correct them, and it's not just for the sake of correcting them. It's because I actually think that they did kind of make a good observation here, but it's slightly inaccurate with the way they described it. So they seem to be responding to what I talk about in Sawyer's episode Outlaws, where the boar's kind of harassing him and he's having these dreams and he hears the whispers that, quote the last words of the man that he killed. And in that part of my video, I say that, if not for Sawyer's own small victory over his demons, this could have played out any way that was more beneficial to the Man in Black. So I think that's what they're responding to when they say that Sawyer and Charlie's first flashback episodes step into healing and redemption. The correction I want to make is that that's not Sawyer's first flashback episode. That would have been Confidence Man, which was the 8th episode of season 1. But them saying that and then me thinking in my head, well, that wasn't Sawyer's first flashback episode, that actually made me realize that they do actually kind of parallel each other in a cool way. So Charlie's first flashback episode is The Moth, which is the 7th episode. And that's right before Sawyer's first flashback episode, which is the 8th episode, Confidence Man. Then each of their second episodes, it's 15 Homecoming, that's Charlie, the one where he kills Ethan. And then immediately after that is Sawyer's episode again, which is the 16th episode, Outlaws. And that's the one with the boar and all that. So that what I think is interesting, I never would have, thought about this if they hadn't said what they said. Charlie's first flashback episode indeed shows him taking a step towards healing and redemption. That's the one where he throws his heroin into the fire, and it's this really triumphant moment. Whereas the next episode, Sawyer's first flashback episode, is kind of the opposite. He kind of rejects the chance at healing and redemption. The resolution of that episode, he gets stabbed. He tries to tell Jack to let him die. And then after that, Kate confronts him with her realization that he's the one that wrote the letter. And he does kind of confide in her the story of what happened when he was a kid. But when she starts to feel sorry for him, he rejects it. He pushes her away. And then the very last thing we see in that episode, if I remember correctly, I think it's the very last thing, he's acting like he's going to burn the letter, but then he doesn't. So Sawyer's first flashback episode is kind of the opposite of Charlie's, where he rejects any chance at healing or redemption. But then you skip ahead 7 episodes and you get Charlie's second flashback episode, and it's kind of a step back for Charlie, because that one, in the flashbacks, you get to see like possibly the lowest point of his life, but also on the island, like the resolution to his on-island story is he murders a dude because he wants to feel and be seen as useful. He wants to be seen as somebody that can take care of the people he cares about. So yeah, Charlie's second episode is kind of a step back, whereas his first one was a step towards redemption. And then Sawyer's second episode, which immediately follows that again, that's the one where he, kind of has that victory over his personal demons, and he doesn't shoot the boar, and he just lets it go, and he goes back, and he willingly gives Jack the gun back. That's how that episode ends for Sawyer. So yes, that one is a step in the direction of healing and redemption. So yeah, like I said, I think that was kind of a cool thing to note, is that the Sawyer and Charlie's episodes in the first season are paired together, and they kind of reflect on each other. One starts out with a step forward, then a step back, and the other one does the opposite. So even from the very beginning, these whispers fit a pattern that clued us in as to what was really going on in the big picture of the show. And the last part of Engine's comment that I wanted to go over, it fits the whole show's theme that the man in black was in the background trying to make them go worse. Yeah, so I've kind of already been getting at this for a while, but yeah, I feel like the man in black is the perfect antagonist. Kind of in general, but like for Lost specifically, the whole concept, the whole premise of Lost, is that these strangers end up in this situation together, and they have to reconcile with their past, with their mistakes, and they have to learn to live together in order to survive. Just looking at that premise, like without even getting into the idea of a character that is an antagonist, the thing that they have to overcome is conflict and allowing past mistakes to haunt them in such a way that they don't move on and grow and progress. So if you were going to introduce a villain of the show, then there's no better option than a literal representation of conflict and your past coming back to haunt you. The man in black represents all of the metaphorical things that the survivors have to overcome. Conflict, death, lies, deception, manipulation, darkness. I mean, yeah, I'm probably missing several things. But yeah, he is the embodiment, again, the literal representation of all of these things. He is the perfect villain for this story. And once again, I feel like the degree to which he is involved in the story throughout the series is severely underestimated by a lot of people. Okay, so yeah, I've got to do something about me rambling to the extent that I do, and yeah, that's one of the reasons that I want to start addressing these comments in shorter individual videos. So yeah, I am gonna start doing that probably after the next series. But okay, let's try and barrel through the rest of these. So if the monster is behind all or most of these apparitions, does that mean it's also generating the whispering that often accompanies them? Well, considering the whispers can be heard in the moments just before the monster strikes to kill Echo, this too had already seemed implied. David Freeman says, "This is why I think the death of Echo was so important, because it did give us the answers about the whispers, the man in black, the black smoke, all at the same time. We just didn't know it yet back in season 3. So yeah, I agree. We've talked before about how, outside of the show, Echo was killed off because the actor didn't want to be on the show anymore. But this is a good example of something where the showrunners had to adjust the story they were telling because of real world factors. It's not a question of making it up as they go along. There are these complications that cause them to have to adjust and adapt their story. And I think what they did with Echo is incredible. I mean, it's so impressive that they made that adjustment in the way that they did. Because yes, anytime I'm showing the show to somebody that hasn't seen it before and I'm watching it with them, when we get to the cost of living episode, the thing I say before we start it is, this one has so many hints as to what is going on in the big picture of the series. I do also say that about the episode Deus Ex Machina in season 1, because I think that is true as well. But it's especially true for the cost of living, and the fact that that wasn't even planned originally. Yeah, I think it's incredible that the writers managed to pull that off. That they ended up taking this bad situation, that kind of derailed their plans, and they used it in a way to create some incredible foreshadowing and throw these major hints at what was actually going on. This happens because Ana Lucia and her group assume that the others had just abducted Cindy and are now surrounding them. But this doesn't make sense for a few reasons. Every other time the others had attacked the tailies, not to mention when Echo and Jin witnessed them passing through the jungle the day before, they did so silently. This would even include their abduction of Cindy just moments earlier, assuming this is actually what happened to her. The next thing I wanted to talk about is a result of several comments that I got, including one from JewelTom10630, who says, "The Cindy abduction is very interesting, especially now after seeing this video." Another one came from Ben Ward, who said, "I'd be interested to know if you have a different theory for what happened to Sydney, as she was definitely with the others later. Maybe she was snatched up by the men in black, but quickly dumped with no time to kill her while executing the rest of the plan. Then she got taken by the others later. It could just be that the others took her with no knowledge of what the man in black was up to, but if I recall correctly, that doesn't fit their pattern up until then. They hadn't taken any other people one by one as the tailies trekked through the jungle, right? They'd only come when they were sleeping and taken large numbers of them." So I did previously comment on the Cindy situation in my overly long going back video that was like an hour and 56 minutes and responded to a bunch of feedback I got to other follow-up videos. So I'm going to insert the clip of me talking about Cindy into this video. Now, I do feel that Cindy herself, I feel like what happened to her was a very unique and different situation. We do know for a fact that the others did abduct the other 12 tailies that went missing. 3 that were abducted on the first night, and then 9 more that were abducted a couple weeks later. But Cindy herself, the reason that we kind of assume that she was abducted is because A, the biggest reason, she does show up with them later on, and B, she disappears right before we start hearing whispers, which at that point we largely associated with the others. But this, of course, raises a lot of interesting questions. For example, if the others wanted Cindy, why was she not abducted during the second raid on the tail section? At that point, Goodwin had been with them for 2 weeks, and he had compiled a list of people he thought were worth taking, and yet we know Cindy was not on that list. When Ana Lucia discovers said list, only the 9 names of the people that were taken were on it. So if the others abducted Cindy later on, what changed between then and that point at which they decided it was worth the risk of grabbing her in broad daylight? What I mean is the first 2 abductions occurred in the middle of the night when their targets and the rest of the camp were asleep. Whereas the abduction of Cindy would have been in the middle of the day while everyone's awake and somewhat alert, including Cindy herself. All of that's to say, I actually don't think that the others abducted Cindy. My explanation for what I believe happened to her is another example of something that largely relies on my own headcanon and my own sense of storytelling, as well as my own sense of what I think makes more sense than her being abducted by the others in that moment. But because my explanation for what happened to Cindy is largely just headcanon, it's once again something that I'm not super comfortable sharing by me just spouting it out in this format. It is something I would like to share eventually in a more narrative form. What exactly that might look like, I haven't quite figured out yet. And then, recently, user Mark Forcellino commented on that, saying, "Forgive me, but have you ever gone in depth on your theory regarding Cindy's disappearance? I have some ideas where you might be going with it, but that is one loose thread for me." So, I have not gone into my theory for the reasons that I said in that clip. But I also wouldn't even call it a theory because, and I think I said this in the clip too, it's been a while since I watched it, but we have so little information about what happened to Cindy that we kind of, the gaps that we have to fill, I mean, you just kind of have to take certain liberties with it. All we know is she suddenly disappeared, even though there was no trace of anybody being around them. Shortly after she disappeared, the whispers did manifest, but depending on which interpretation of the whispers you prefer, that shouldn't have had anything to do with her disappearing. We also know it doesn't at all fit the pattern of the others abducting people. We know, again, I'm pretty sure I talked about this in the clip, we know that the others didn't want her back when Goodwin had provided the list of 9 names. But then the last thing that we know that seems to contradict some of that other stuff is that Cindy is with the others willingly later on. We see her, I think the first time we see her with them is in season 3 when she appears on Hydra Island with the kids. So with such a lack of information, we kind of have the option, not even the option, we're kind of forced to come up with an answer on our own that makes the most sense to us. And yeah, I've gone into all of the reasons, or at least most of the reasons, that it does not make sense to me that she was abducted. Um, and that then, for me, means I have to come up with an explanation that does make sense. That how she ends up going from with the tailies to suddenly disappearing to eventually being with the others willingly, and them willingly allowing her to be with them. Um, so yeah, publicly I have not shared my headcanon for what that explanation is. And as I said in the clip, my reason for that is it's a story. It's a story I've come up with for what happened to her. And I feel that it would be best shared in the form of a story. And I still don't know how exactly I might end up sharing that at some point. But what I do know is me just saying it, me just describing it like this, I don't think that would do it justice. In my head, what I have in my head really works for me. I kind of imagine it as an episode or like a series of flashbacks depicting what I'm seeing in my head. And so for me to just try and describe that, like, robotically rattling it off, I just don't think that would do it justice. And I don't think you guys would enjoy that. At least not as much as, if I presented it in a more compelling way. So yes, I apologize to you guys. I apologize to Mark, but for now I'm going to continue sitting on that. I will say, Mark says he has some ideas where I might be going with it. And then Ben kind of put forth, certain things. I have no doubt some of you could probably guess or get a sense of the direction my mind goes. But the specifics of it, I would be shocked if anybody guessed, because again, there's so little information that we have that I've kind of just created a short story of what happened to her in my head. It's possible that other people could be thinking along the same lines, but I think I have a fairly unique, more specific version of what happened to her that, again, I would like to share eventually, and I do intend to share eventually. Now, hopefully I can do a bit better of a job addressing a different comment from Mark Forcellino, where he says, "This all fits with the idea, which I have also come to agree with, that the flashbacks we are seeing are the black smoke reading people's memories, as is shown to us when Mr. Echo comes face to face with the black smoke." So I like this observation. I don't agree with it in a literal sense, just because, that would imply that the monster is just randomly going person to person and extracting, specifically tied together memories. Like in Jack's first flashback episode, his first flashback is of him as a kid. And then it skips so much of his life, including many of the other things we later see in other flashback episodes, and just gets to why he was in Sydney and why he was on the plane when it crashed. So, we see those specific flashbacks as the audience, as the people experiencing the story, because they are what's relevant to what is being communicated to us by the story. I don't think those are the specific things that the monster is extracting in that exact sequence. In fact, I think that, as we see with Echo, I think that when it scans a person, we also see this with Richard, I think it collects all or most of their memories pretty quickly. I think it downloads them pretty fast So I don't think when we see a flashback, we are literally being shown what the monster is learning. But I do think on a thematic level, I mean, this is another great example of why the Man in Black is the perfect antagonist, because he is experiencing, I don't think he's literally experiencing the flashbacks the way that we are, but he is learning about the characters in a similar way to how we are. And so, yeah, I do think that idea is pretty cool. And finally, the last comment that I want to address, it isn't so much related to the whispers as it is a question about YouTube. This one comes from SF, who asks, why is YouTube deprioritizing your videos? I did not get this in my queue. So I'm not going to pretend to have any kind of comprehension of YouTube and the way the algorithm works. It could be just because of the long absence. I did disappear there for over half a year. So it could be that. The only solution that I can suggest is, as annoying as it is to hear over and over again, if you're subscribed and you want to be notified when videos come out, click the notification bell. I know I'm subscribed to several channels that I don't find out about new videos of theirs until way after the fact. And yeah, the only solution seems to be clicking the notification bell. I haven't had any problems once I have done that. I don't know if SF, it's possible that they have clicked the notification bell and they were still experiencing this issue. That wouldn't shock me, knowing YouTube. But yeah, that's the only thing I could suggest. That's why I hate myself for saying it in all the videos where I say it. Because I've seen all the other YouTube videos that say it, and it's hard to have to keep saying these things without it feeling repetitive and annoying. So yeah, I always feel bad when I say it, but this is one of the reasons that I do say it, is because I know some of the stuff I'm subscribed to, I want to be notified when there's new stuff, and I'm frustrated when I'm not notified. So that's why I kind of feel the need, like pretty much everybody else on YouTube, I feel the need to say that often. So yeah, that's, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. If you haven't clicked the bell, please click the bell. But okay, I think that's everything. I did want to update on, the upcoming release schedule. Yeah, so in the last video, I was saying that I was going to do the second part of this, which you're now seeing, and then I was going to do a follow-up to a crash course, and I was going to do that in 2 parts. Not doing that one in 2 parts. I'm still going to do it, but I have since realized I don't have as much to say about that one as I thought I did. Thank God. So that's just going to be one video. I'm still trying to get this out by Sunday, like the video you're watching now. I'm still hoping to have that out on April 9th, Sunday, April 9th. The only reason I am now second guessing that is because of how long I've talked. Somehow it's even longer than part 1, which I did not expect. And I do have stuff going on this weekend, so it may not be realistic that I'll have the editing done in time for that to be released Sunday. And I will try and update. In the meantime, I'll try and update you guys in the community tab. Like I'll make a post on YouTube if this doesn't end up coming out Sunday. But yeah, I will continue to keep you guys updated either through videos like this or through making posts on YouTube. So yeah, be sure to, if you're looking for an update and you haven't heard anything, you haven't seen a video with an update, feel free to go to my channel page, go to the community tab, and that's where I post things such as updates. But okay, I hope to see you guys next time.
Oh, you're still here. Hopefully that means you enjoyed this video. If so, please consider sticking around and being a constant for this channel by clicking right up here to subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell icon if you would like to be notified when more videos like this one arrive. In the meantime, feel free to check out previous content from this channel by clicking here or here. Oh no. Please subscribe.